My religious community made me breastfeed another woman's baby. For a year after I miscarried at 20 weeks to prove I deserved another pregnancy, while the birth mother watched but couldn't touch her own son. When we found out they'd been secretly feeding us abortion pills, disguised as prenatal vitamins, and had murdered 17 women who tried to leave, we stole their files and ran, but they hunted us through the woods with the elders carrying medical equipment. When did you know your community was pure evil? My religious community mandated that any woman who miscarried had to raise another member's newborn for 1 year to prove she deserved to try again. When I lost my baby at 20 weeks, they took me straight from the hospital to Mary's house, where I was forced to breastfeed and care for her infant son while she watched, waiting to see if I was mother enough to earn another pregnancy. The happiest day of my life was when I found out I was pregnant. After 2 years of trying, I decorated the nursery in yellow, sung to my belly every night, named her Lucy. Then I felt her stop moving. The ultrasound showed no heartbeat. I lay on the floor for hours, too devastated to even sit up. As I delivered my dead daughter, Elder Thompson's wife stood at my bedside explaining the program. Women who miscarried had to prove their maternal worth by raising another woman's child perfectly for 1 year. Still bleeding, breasts aching with milk, I was driven to Mary's house where her 3-day-old son waited. The rules were precise and cruel. I had to live in Mary's house, sleep in the nursery, and care for baby Samuel every moment while she observed and scored my performance. If I cried while holding him, points deducted for emotional instability. If I sang the lullabies I'd written for Lucy, points off for living in the past. Mary wasn't allowed to touch her own son for the entire year. She could only watch as I nursed him with the milk meant for Lucy, changed him, rocked him to sleep. She sat in a chair 3 feet away, close enough to see his face but forbidden from holding him. The elders said this taught birth mothers gratitude and grieving mothers redemption. It was destroying us both. Samuel would cry at night and I'd rush to him, my body responding to his needs while my heart shattered remembering Lucy's perfect stillness. Mary would stand in the doorway at 3 a.m., arms wrapped around herself, tears streaming as she watched me comfort her baby she wasn't allowed to touch. Samuel's first smile happened while I was changing him, and Mary made a sound like an animal being gutted. She fell to her knees, begging me to make him do it again. I tried everything while she sobbed, and she lost 15 points that day for excessive emotional display. Because the community monitored us constantly. Elder Thompson's wife would arrive unannounced to observe my maternal performance. Was I singing enough? Was my milk production adequate? Did I show appropriate joy during playtime? Meanwhile, Mary deteriorated. She'd press her face against the nursery door at night, listening to me sing to her baby. By month 6, we were both ghosts. I'd memorized every detail of Samuel's face, knowing I'd have to give him back. Mary had started pulling out her hair, leaving bald patches she tried to hide. Neither of us could survive much more of this. And then Samuel got sick. His fever spiked to 103 and he wouldn't stop crying. Mary begged to hold him, just once, but Elder Thompson's wife blocked her. You touch that baby, you both fail. She starts over with another family. You never get him back. I watched Mary collapse, screaming that her baby needed his mother's comfort, not some grieving stranger's arms. That broke something in me. I handed Samuel to Mary and said, "Comfort your son." But when she took him, he screamed harder, reaching back for me, the only mother he'd ever known. Mary's face crumbled as she realized her own baby didn't recognize her. She tried singing, rocking, everything, but Samuel only calmed when I took him back. Mary's husband screamed at us the whole time, placing emergency calls to the elders and forcing us into the study together to wait for our correction. Mary was completely panicking. Her baby didn't recognize her, and if the elders had their way, he never would. I've seen him filing reports after other women failed, she said, pulling keys from behind a bookshelf. Church basement, files on every woman who's been through the program. Names, dates, what happened to them. Her eyes were wild. I need to know if anyone's ever gotten their child back. I need to know now this ends. We had minutes before they came for us. We could submit to correction or break into the church and find out what happened to the women who came before us. We ran through the darkness to the church, Samuel clutched in my arms. The basement files started innocently enough. Then Mary found the medical files. Her hands shook as she read. Every woman who'd miscarried had been given the same prenatal vitamins by the church clinic. I grabbed a bottle from the shelf, recognized the pills I'd taken religiously. The label was fake. The real medication inside was mifepristone, termination of pregnancy medication. They'd culled our babies. Even worse was the folder marked successful redemptions. Women who completed their year and were deemed worthy to try again all had the same outcome. Triplets or quadruplets, always. The fertility substances they gave redeemed mothers were experimental, causing dangerous multiple births. Half the women and babies died in childbirth. We were grabbing files when Elder Thompson appeared. Sisters, you think you're the first to discover our breeding program? He showed us photos of women who'd tried to leave, their faces crossed out in red. Sarah tried to go to the police. Car accident. Rebecca contacted a reporter. House fire. They thought they could expose God's plan too. Footsteps echoed above us. More elders were coming down the stairs. Mary clutched the stolen files while I held Samuel. We had seconds to decide. Surrender and return to our torture, or run with proof of their murders and risk becoming their next victims. The heavy wooden door slammed behind us as we burst into the night. My legs pumped harder than they ever had. Samuel bouncing against my chest as I clutched him with one arm. Mary ran beside me, the stolen files pressed against her body, papers rustling with each desperate stride. Behind us, Elder Thompson's voice boomed across the church grounds. More voices joined his, calling out coordinates and directions. They were organizing a search pattern. My heart hammered as I recognized the systematic way they moved. This wasn't their first hunt. We veered left toward the residential section, ducking between houses. Samuel whimpered at the jostling, and I pressed my hand gently over his mouth. The movement felt wrong, silencing a baby I'd spent 6 months teaching to express himself freely. But silence meant survival now. Mary grabbed my elbow and pulled me into the narrow space between 2 garden sheds. We crouched in the shadows, breathing hard. Through the gap, I watched flashlight beams sweep across the path we'd just taken. Elder Thompson strode past, his wife and 3 other elders flanking him. They moved like predators, confident and coordinated. When their footsteps faded, Mary leaned close. Her breath was hot against my ear as she pointed toward the tree line at the community's edge. The woods were thick there, offering cover but also isolation. If they caught us among the trees, no one would hear us scream. We waited another minute before moving. Samuel had fallen into an uneasy sleep against my chest, his tiny fingers still clutched around my shirt. The weight of him felt different now. Not just the child child I'd been forced to raise, but evidence of their cruelty. How many babies had been ripped from their mothers? How many women had endured this torture? Mary led us along the back fences, keeping to the shadows. Every dog bark made us freeze. Every porch light felt like a spotlight. The files in her arms crinkled with each movement, and I worried the sound would give us away. We needed somewhere to hide, to think, to plan. The Hendersons' house sat dark at the end of the row. They were visiting family outside the community. I'd heard Elder Thompson mention it during his last inspection. Mary tried the back door. Locked. She moved to a window, pushing gently. It slid open with a soft scrape. We climbed inside, me passing Samuel through first before hauling myself over the sill. The house smelled like lavender and bread. Normal scents that felt alien after months of living in Mary's sterile nursery. I found a closet in the back bedroom and we huddled inside, pulling the door almost closed. In the darkness, Mary spread the files across the floor. I shifted Samuel to free one hand and helped her sort through them. Medical records, financial documents, photos of women I recognized, women who'd supposedly left the community for family reasons or health issues. One file made my blood freeze. Jennifer Morrison, miscarried twins, entered the program 3 years ago. The final entry was clinical. Failed to complete program. Relocated. But clipped behind it was a newspaper clipping about an unidentified woman found in the river 2 towns over. The photo was grainy, but I recognized Jennifer's distinctive birthmark. Mary found more. So many more. Women who'd questioned the program. Women who'd tried to leave. Women who'd simply broken under the pressure. All relocated. All dead within months. Samuel stirred in my arms, making soft, hungry sounds. My body responded automatically, preparing to nurse him. The biological betrayal of it, my milk letting down for another woman's child while my own daughter lay in an unmarked grave, made me want to scream. But I guided him to my breast, keeping him quiet while we planned. Outside, voices grew closer. They were going house to house. Systematic. Thorough. Mary gathered the most damning files. The medical records proving the forced miscarriages. The financial documents showing the money made from selling babies to infertile community members. The death certificates of women who'd tried to expose them. We couldn't stay here. But where could we go? The community was isolated, surrounded by miles of farmland and forest. The elders controlled the only vehicles. Talk about taking It Takes a Village to a whole new terrifying level. This community's idea of childcare makes helicopter parenting look like free-range farming, and I'm pretty sure their prenatal vitamins need a recall notice bigger than. Even if we made it to the main road, they'd catch us before we reached town. Mary's eyes met mine in the dim light. Neither of us spoke, but we both understood. We couldn't run far enough. Not with a baby, not on foot, not with them hunting us. Our only chance was to stay within the community but find allies. Other women who'd suffered, other mothers whose babies had been stolen or culled. The search party was 3 houses away now. We slipped out the back window and moved toward the community center. If we could reach the women's dormitory, where the younger unmarried women lived, maybe we could wake them, show them the proof, start a revolution from within. But as we rounded the corner, Catherine Chen stepped out of the shadows. I'd mentored her when she first joined the community. Sweet, trusting Catherine who'd been trying to conceive for months. She looked at us with wide eyes, taking in Samuel, the files, our panicked faces. For a moment, hope loomed in my chest. Then she opened her mouth and screamed for the elders. We ran again, her cries bringing the search party toward us. My legs burned and my arms ached from carrying Samuel. Mary stumbled, papers scattering. She dropped to her knees, frantically gathering them as footsteps pounded closer. I had to choose. Help Mary save the evidence or run with Samuel. The baby's weight in my arms made the decision. I couldn't abandon him, but I couldn't abandon Mary either. I grabbed her arm with my free hand, hauling her up. Some files fluttered away in the wind, but she clutched the core documents. The community greenhouse loomed ahead. I knew the layout. I'd worked there during my pregnancy, tending vegetables while dreaming of teaching Lucy about growing things. The back entrance was hidden behind climbing vines. We pushed through, the glass door clicking shut behind us. Inside, the air hung thick with humidity. Tomato plants created a maze of green. We wove between the rows, seeking the storage room at the center. It had no windows, only one entrance, a trap if they found us, but also a defensive position. Mary wedged a chair under the door handle while I sank onto a pile of empty seed bags. Samuel fussed, picking up on our fear. I rocked him, humming the lullaby I'd written for Lucy, the one that had cost me points, the one I sang anyway because some small part of me needed to mother my own child, even in memory. Through the walls, we heard them searching. Elder Thompson's voice carried clearly, organizing teams to surround the building. They knew we were trapped. Time was on their side. Mary spread the remaining files. Financial records showing Elder Thompson personally profited from each baby placement. Medical charts proving the systematic poisoning. Photos of the graves hidden in the far woods. We had enough to destroy them, but only if we could get it to someone who cared. The door handle rattled. Elder Thompson's voice came through, falsely gentle. He promised mercy if we surrendered, promised we could complete our year peacefully, promised Samuel would be safe. Lies wrapped in scripture, delivered in the same tone he used during sermons. Mary looked at the files, then at me. Her face held a question I couldn't answer. How do you choose between justice for the dead and safety for the living? How do you weigh a baby's life against the chance to save future mothers from this torture? Samuel reached for Mary, the first time he'd shown interest in her since that awful night when he'd rejected her comfort. She touched his hand carefully, tears streaming. In that moment, she wasn't the woman scoring my maternal performance. She was just a mother who'd lost everything. The rattling stopped. Silence stretched, more terrifying than threats. They were planning something. Mary and I pressed together in the darkness. The stolen evidence spread around us like accusations. Samuel dozed between us, unaware that his small life had become the center of a war between mothers and the men who controlled them. Then we smelled smoke. The acrid smell grew stronger, seeping through the greenhouse vents. My throat constricted as wisps of gray smoke curled under the door. They were smoking us out like animals. Mary stuffed the most crucial files into her shirt while I adjusted Samuel against my chest. The storage room had become a death trap. We burst through the door into a wall of smoke that stung our eyes and burned our lungs. The elders had set controlled fires at the greenhouse entrances, forcing us toward the center where they waited. Through the haze, I spotted Elder Thompson's silhouette by the main exit. His wife blocked the side door. Other figures moved through the smoke, tightening their circle. Samuel coughed against my shoulder, his tiny lungs struggling with the toxic air. Mary pointed toward the back wall where old ventilation panels had rusted through. We crawled beneath the tomato plants, staying low where the air was clearer. My knees scraped against concrete vibrate as we reached the panels. Mary kicked hard, once, twice, until the metal gave way with a shriek. We squeezed through the jagged opening, Samuel crying now from the smoke and fear. Behind us, Elder Thompson barked orders to seal the exits. They thought we were still trapped inside. The cool night air hit our faces as we emerged behind the greenhouse. My legs shook from adrenaline and exhaustion, but we couldn't stop. Mary led us through the community's back gardens, past the chicken coops and storage sheds I'd helped maintain during my pregnancy. We reached the old barn that stored winter supplies. Inside, hay bales created a maze of hiding spots. I collapsed behind a stack, gasping for clean air while Samuel whimpered against me. Mary peered through a crack in the wall, watching for pursuit. The barn door creaked, footsteps crunched on scattered hay. We pressed deeper into the shadows as Elder Thompson's wife called out sweetly, promising understanding and forgiveness if we'd just come out and talk. Her voice made my skin crawl. Samuel chose that moment to let out a sharp cry. The footsteps stopped, then moved directly toward our hiding spot. Mary grabbed a pitchfork leaning against the wall while I tried desperately to quiet Samuel. Elder Thompson's wife rounded the hay bales, her flashlight beam catching us like deer. She smiled that cold smile I'd seen during countless inspections. Mary raised the pitchfork defensively, but the older woman just laughed. She explained how the barn was surrounded, how we had nowhere left to run. She detailed what would happen to us, to Samuel, if we didn't surrender immediately. Her casual cruelty as she described separating us forever made my stomach turn. Mary lunged with the pitchfork. Elder Thompson's wife sidestepped easily, but the movement gave us an opening. We bolted past her toward the barn's rear exit. She screamed for the others as we burst into the night again. This time, they were ready. Flashlight beams converged on us from 3 directions. We veered toward the community's meeting hall, the only building still dark. My legs burned and my arms ached from carrying Samuel, but stopping meant losing him forever. The meeting hall's side door hung slightly ajar. We slipped inside, finding ourselves in the kitchen where community meals were prepared. Pots and pans hung from hooks, casting strange shadows in the moonlight filtering through windows. Mary barricaded the door while I caught my breath. Samuel needed changing desperately, his diaper soaked through from our flight. I laid him on the counter, working quickly by feel in the darkness. Even now, running for our lives, his basic needs couldn't wait. Through the kitchen window, I watched elders positioning themselves around the building. They moved with practiced efficiency, like they'd done this before. How many women had they hunted through these same buildings? Mary found matches and emergency candles in a drawer. She lit one carefully, shielding the flame. In the flickering light, she spread out the salvaged files. Birth certificates altered, death certificates forged. Financial records showing Elder Thompson had built his fortune selling babies to desperate couples. A new sound made us freeze. Car engines, multiple vehicles pulling up outside. Mary and I exchanged panicked looks. Were they bringing more elders? Planning to transport us somewhere remote? The main door burst open. We grabbed the files and ran deeper into the building, through the sanctuary where I'd sat through countless sermons about maternal duty and God's plan for women. The pulpit where Elder Thompson preached loomed like an accusation. Behind us, voices echoed through the halls. They weren't rushing. They knew we were trapped. The meeting hall had limited exits, all now guarded. We climbed the narrow stairs to the choir loft, hoping elevation might give us options. From above, we could see flashlights sweeping the sanctuary. Elder Thompson entered with 6 other men. They spread out methodically, checking every pew, every corner. It was only a matter of time before they climbed the stairs. Samuel stirred restlessly. He was hungry again, the stress and activity making him need comfort nursing. I couldn't deny him, even now. I shifted him to my breast while Mary watched the elders below. The intimacy of feeding him while being hunted felt surreal. Mary suddenly grabbed my arm. She'd noticed something I'd missed. The choir loft connected to the building's old bell tower through a narrow passage. We crawled through, finding ourselves in a tiny room with rope pulleys for bells that no longer existed. A window overlooked the parking lot. Below, I saw not just elder vehicles, but 2 ambulances. My blood ran cold. They'd brought medical support. Whatever they planned for us, they expected injuries. Mary tested the old bell ropes. They seemed sturdy enough. She gestured toward the window, suggesting we could climb down. But with Samuel in my arms, the risk felt enormous. I'm trying to figure out why Catherine screamed for the elders when she saw them with the baby in files. What made her choose their side after trying so hard to have her own baby? One slip would cull us both. Footsteps echoed on the choir loft stairs. We were out of time. Mary went first, wrapping the rope around her waist and squeezing through the window. She descended slowly, the rope creaking ominously. Halfway down, she lost her grip. She fell the last 8 feet, landing hard on the gravel. I watched her struggle to stand, clearly hurt but mobile. She limped toward the nearest vehicle as I prepared to follow with Samuel. The door to the bell tower slammed open. Elder Thompson stood there, breathing hard, his face twisted with rage. He demanded I hand over Samuel immediately. Behind him, other elders crowded the narrow passage. I clutched Samuel tighter, backing toward the window. Elder Thompson stepped forward, explaining how they'd make my death look accidental. Another grieving mother who couldn't handle the program. They'd done it before. Samuel wailed, picking up on my terror. Elder Thompson reached for him. I twisted away, my back hitting the window frame. Below, Mary had reached a van, frantically trying door handles. Elder Thompson lunged. I dodged sideways, his momentum carrying him into the window frame. For a moment, he teetered on the edge. Other elders rushed forward to steady him. In the chaos, I grabbed the rope with one hand while clutching Samuel with the other. The descent was terrifying. Rope burning my palm as I half slid, half fell. Samuel screamed the entire way down. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my ankle, but I was down. I limped toward Mary, who'd managed to break into an older truck. She was frantically hot wiring it, skills I never knew she possessed. Behind us, elders poured from the building. The engine caught just as they reached us. Mary gunned it, tires spinning on gravel. We shot forward, clipping the ambulance and sending elders diving for safety. But the community's main gate was closed and locked. Mary aimed the truck directly at it. We crashed through in a shower of splinters and twisted metal. The truck's front end crumpled, steam hissing from the radiator, but we were through. We made it maybe half a mile before the engine died completely. Behind us, headlights appeared. They were coming. Mary grabbed the files while I secured Samuel. We abandoned the truck and plunged into the wheat fields that bordered the community. The tall grain provided cover but slowed our progress. Samuel fussed constantly now, overwhelmed and hungry. My ankle throbbed with each step. Mary's breathing was labored from her fall. We were injured, exhausted, and running out of options. Through the wheat, we glimpsed a farmhouse. Not community property, but close enough they might be sympathetic to the elders. We had had to risk it. Mary knocked frantically while I tried to quiet Samuel. An elderly couple answered, taking in our disheveled appearance with alarm. Mary thrust the files at them, begging them to look, to understand. The woman's face paled as she recognized names in the documents. Her own niece had been in the program years ago. She'd been told the girl moved away. They ushered us inside just as search vehicles appeared on the horizon. The couple, Benjamin and Ruth Hooper, hid us in their root cellar while Elder Thompson pounded on their door. They claimed ignorance, threatened to call real police if the harassment continued. In the cellar's darkness, I nursed Samuel while Mary and I caught our breath. The Hoopers returned after the elders left, bringing water and first aid supplies. Ruth cleaned our wounds while Benjamin studied the files with growing horror. They revealed that 3 other families nearby had lost daughters to the community's program. All told, they'd relocated for opportunities elsewhere. The truth was spreading like wildfire through their small farming network, but we couldn't stay hidden forever. Elder Thompson would return with more men, more pressure. The Hoopers helped us plan. Ruth had a sister 2 towns over who ran a women's shelter. She'd take us in, help us figure out next steps. Benjamin drove us in his old pickup, taking back roads to avoid community patrols. Samuel finally slept, exhausted from our ordeal. Mary clutched the files like a lifeline. We'd escaped, but barely, and we all knew this wasn't over. The shelter was a converted Victorian house that had seen better days. Ruth's sister, Catherine Donovan, met us at the door. She took one look at our condition and ushered us inside without questions. Only after we were settled with hot tea did we explain. Catherine's face hardened as she reviewed the files. She'd seen abuse before, but nothing this systematic. She promised to help us contact authorities who weren't connected to the community. But first, we needed rest and medical attention. A doctor friend of Catherine's examined us discreetly. My ankle was sprained but not broken. Mary had bruised ribs from her fall. Samuel, miraculously, was unharmed, just exhausted and clingy. The doctor documented our injuries carefully, creating a record. That night, I lay in a narrow shelter bed with Samuel beside me. For the first time in months, I wasn't being watched or scored, but I couldn't sleep. Every car passing made me tense. Every footstep in the hall sent my heart racing. Mary sat by the window keeping watch. We'd barely spoken since arriving, each processing our escape differently. She'd saved evidence that could destroy the program, but at what cost? We were fugitives now, hiding from men who'd called before. Catherine woke us before dawn. Someone had been asking about us in town. The description matched Elder Thompson. They'd tracked us faster than expected. We needed to move again, but where? The shelter had protocols for domestic violence cases, but nothing like this. She'd arranged for us to stay with a former resident who lived 3 hours away. This woman, Patricia, had escaped her own religious community years ago. She understood what we faced better than most. Catherine would drive us herself. During the drive, Samuel grew fussy. He needed stability, routine, not this constant upheaval. I worried what this stress was doing to him. Mary noticed my concern and reached over to stroke his head. The gesture surprised us both. Patricia's house sat isolated at the end of a dirt road. She greeted us with understanding eyes and strong coffee. Her own story tumbled out as she helped us settle in. Different community, same control. She'd lost 2 babies before escaping. She'd spent years building a network of women who'd fled religious abuse. They shared resources, information, protection. She made calls while we rested, activating connections we didn't know existed. By evening, she had a plan. A journalist who specialized in religious abuse would meet with us. She'd broken similar stories before, knew how to protect sources. The files we'd stolen were enough to start an investigation, but we'd need more witnesses, more proof. Patricia had already reached out to families who'd lost daughters to the program. 3 were willing to talk, others were too frightened. Elder Thompson's reach was long, his threats effective, but cracks were forming in their wall of silence. That night, Patricia showed us her own files. Years of research on communities like ours. The patterns were chilling and consistent. Controlled breeding, forced separations, women who disappeared. Our community wasn't unique, just better hidden. Samuel slept between Mary and me on a pull-out couch. For the first time since this ordeal began, we talked honestly. About our babies, our grief, the torture we'd endured. Mary confessed she'd considered ending her life before I arrived. She'd watched 3 other women go through the program with her son. All had failed or fled. She'd begun to believe she'd never hold him again. Then I arrived, and something shifted. She saw my grief mirror her own. We were both victims. Morning brought troubling news. The Hoopers' barn had burned down. A clear message. Patricia moved us to her basement, reinforcing locks and checking window latches. We were safe for now, but the walls felt like they were closing in. The journalist, Amanda Chen, arrived that afternoon. No relation to Catherine from the community, just an unfortunate coincidence. She reviewed our files with professional intensity, asking pointed questions about dates, names, medical procedures. She'd investigated similar groups before. The legal challenges were immense. Religious freedom protections, isolated communities, victims too traumatized or threatened to testify. But our medical evidence was damning. The forced miscarriages crossed clear legal lines. Amanda spent hours recording our testimonies. Every detail of the program, the hunt, our escape. She was particularly interested in the financial records. Following the money often broke these cases open when testimony alone couldn't. Mary struggled with some questions, talking about Samuel's birth. Those first days she couldn't touch him, broke her composure repeatedly. I found myself comforting her, this woman who'd scored my every maternal action for months. Trauma had bound us in ways neither expected. Amanda left with copies of everything, promising to verify our claims before publication. The story would take weeks to properly investigate. We'd need to stay hidden until then. Patricia assured us her network would help, but that evening Patricia's phone rang. Catherine from the shelter, voice panicked. Elder Thompson and 2 other men had shown up with legal documents, custody papers for Samuel. They claimed I'd kidnapped him from his rightful parents. The documents looked official. Mary's husband had signed, claiming I'd taken their son during a mental health crisis. They'd painted me as a delusional woman who'd lost her own baby and stolen theirs. The inverse of truth, but believable to outsiders. Patricia immediately called a lawyer friend. The custody claim was shaky, but could cause problems. We needed Mary to establish her maternal rights legally. Mary just turned into an action hero with a screwdriver, and suddenly everyone's barn is getting mysterious fire damage. This community really needs to work on their breakup skills, because arson is not a healthy coping mechanism. But that meant coming out of hiding, exposing ourselves to capture. Samuel seemed to sense the tension. He clung to me constantly, whimpering if I set him down even briefly. 7 months of being his only caregiver had created a bond that legal documents couldn't erase. But law didn't always align with reality. The lawyer arrived near midnight. She reviewed everything with grim efficiency. The community had been smart. By framing this as a custody dispute, they'd shifted from criminal to civil territory, harder to prove abuse within family court systems. She outlined our options: none good, fight the custody claim and risk exposure, stay hidden and be painted as kidnappers, or find a way to turn their legal attack against them. The last option intrigued her most. If we could prove the program itself was illegal, the custody papers became void. Parents couldn't sign away rights under duress or within criminal enterprises. Our evidence suggested both, but we'd need the journalist's story to break first. 3 days passed in tense waiting. Patricia moved us between safe houses in her network, always moving, always watching. Samuel adapted better than expected, but I saw the strain in his eyes. Babies shouldn't live like fugitives. Then Amanda called. She'd verified our medical evidence. The pills were indeed mifepristone. The fertility substances were experimental, not approved for human use. Financial records showed clear profit motives. She was ready to publish, but wanted one more thing. She needed current community members to corroborate. People still inside who could confirm the program continued. Without that, Elder Thompson could claim our evidence was old. The program discontinued. We needed an inside source. Mary knew someone. Her sister-in-law, Benjamin's wife, still lived in the community. She'd been trying to conceive for years. If the pattern held, she'd soon be given the same vitamins that culled our babies. Maybe she'd help. Contacting her was dangerous. Phones were monitored. Mail was read. But Patricia knew ways. Her network included women still trapped inside various communities. They'd developed codes, secret channels, messages could be passed. 2 days later, we got a response. Benjamin's wife, Rachel, was terrified but willing to help. She'd already started the vitamins, already felt something was wrong. She'd gather what evidence she could, but needed extraction plans. Patricia's network activated. They'd done extractions before. It required precision, timing, and luck. Rachel would need to leave during a community event when her absence wouldn't be immediately noticed. The Harvest Festival was coming up. We spent days planning. Maps of the community, guard schedules, escape routes. I knew the layout intimately from my months there. Mary knew the people, their habits. Together, we crafted a plan that might work. But Elder Thompson escalated first. Patricia's current safe house was compromised. We barely escaped as vehicles surrounded the building. Someone in the network had talked. Trust, our most valuable resource, was breaking down. We fled to the one place they wouldn't expect, back toward the community, to a foreclosed farm just outside their territory. Patricia had prepared it as a last resort, close enough to monitor them, far enough to avoid patrols. From there, we watched the Harvest Festival preparations through binoculars. The entire community would gather for 3 days of celebration, Rachel's extraction window, but security had tripled since our escape. Getting her out would be nearly impossible. Amanda's story was scheduled to break in 2 days. We just needed to survive until then. But Samuel developed a fever that night. Nothing serious, but any illness terrified me now. We had no access to doctors, no way to get help without exposure. I spent the night walking him, singing softly, monitoring his temperature. Mary helped, bringing cool cloths and taking turns holding him. We'd become an odd family unit, bound by trauma and necessity. Neither of us spoke about what would happen after this ended. Morning brought Samuel's fever breaking and new intelligence. Rachel had hidden a cache of documents in the greenhouse where we'd first been trapped. Financial records, medical files, photos of the graves, more evidence than we'd managed to steal. But retrieving them meant returning to the place we'd barely escaped. The greenhouse would be watched. They knew its significance to us. It could be a trap, using Rachel as bait, or it could be the final evidence needed to destroy them. Patricia left to coordinate with Amanda. The story would break tomorrow. Federal investigators were already quietly preparing. Our evidence had triggered interest at levels Elder Thompson couldn't control, but they needed Rachel's documents to ensure convictions. Mary and I studied the community through binoculars, guard patterns, vehicle movements, weak points. We knew every building, every path. If anyone could get in and out unseen, it was us. But the risk felt enormous. Samuel laid on a blanket beside us, oblivious to our planning. He'd started pulling himself up recently, trying to stand. Each milestone felt bittersweet. Lucy should have been doing this. The grief never left, just made room for other emotions. As darkness fell, we made our choice. Patricia would create a diversion on the opposite side of the community. While guards responded, Mary and I would retrieve Rachel's cache. In and out, 15 minutes maximum. Samuel would stay with Patricia's friend. Leaving Samuel felt wrong on every level. My body physically ached as I kissed him goodbye, but bringing him back into danger was worse. Mary squeezed my hand as we prepared. We'd survived this long together. We could do this. The community looked different in darkness. Familiar buildings became menacing shadows. We crept through the wheat field where we'd fled weeks ago. Every sound made us freeze. Every movement could be a guard. The greenhouse loomed ahead, partially repaired from the fire damage. We circled wide, approaching from the blind spot I'd discovered during my pregnancy work. The back panels we'd escaped through had been reinforced. We'd need another way. Mary pointed to a maintenance shed nearby. Inside, we found tools and a ladder. The greenhouse roof had ventilation panels that might provide access. Risky, but better than the watch doors. We carried the ladder carefully, avoiding motion sensors. Climbing felt exposed and vulnerable. The ladder creaked under our weight. Below, a guard walked past, flashlight sweeping. We froze, hearts pounding, until he moved on. The roof panel lifted with effort, revealing darkness below. I dropped down first, landing soft among the tomato plants. The smell brought visceral memories of our first escape. Mary followed, grimacing as her still tender ribs protested. We had minutes before the next patrol. Rachel's directions led us to a false bottom in a storage bin. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were files that made our original theft look minor. Photos of the grave sites with names and dates, medical records for dozens of women, financial transfers reaching back decades. But voices outside cut our examination short, multiple guards converging. Patricia's diversion had been discovered too quickly. We shoved files into our shirts and prepared to climb. The roof panel seemed impossibly far above. Mary boosted me up first. I caught the edge, hauling myself through. As I turned to help her, flashlights blazed through the greenhouse door. She was spotted, trapped. Our eyes met for one terrible moment. She thrust the remaining files up at me, shouting for me to run. Guards rushed toward her as I grabbed the documents. I wanted to stay, to help, but the evidence had to survive. The story had to break. Justice required sacrifice. I ran across the roof as shouts erupted below. The ladder was gone, moved by guards. I sprinted to the far edge, judging the drop. Too far, but a maintenance truck sat parked nearby. I leaped, landing hard on its roof. The impact knocked my breath out, but I rolled off and kept running. Behind me, the community erupted in activity. immediately. Lights blazed. Engines started. They'd have Mary, but I had the files. The proof that would destroy them. I reached the fence line as vehicles roared toward me. The wheat field offered cover. I plunged in, crashing through stalks. Headlights swept overhead. Voices called coordinates, but I knew these fields better now. At the foreclosed farm, Patricia waited with the engine running. We peeled out as pursuit vehicles crested the hill. Samuel cried in his car seat, sensing my distress. I clutched him and the files, everything we'd sacrificed to obtain. Patricia drove through the night, taking random turns to lose pursuit. By dawn, we'd reached the journalist's office. Amanda was waiting with federal agents. The story would break within hours. The evidence was overwhelming, but Mary was gone, captured, saving me, ensuring the files escaped. I couldn't stop seeing her face in that final moment, determined, accepting. She'd chosen justice over freedom, the mother's ultimate sacrifice. Amanda published the story as I gave my statement to federal agents. Within hours, it exploded across news networks, religious community, forced miscarriages, baby trafficking, murder. The words felt inadequate for our lived horror. By noon, law enforcement surrounded the community. Elder Thompson was arrested trying to flee. His wife collapsed, claiming ignorance. Other elders turned on each other, trying to save themselves. The program's structure crumbled within days. They found Mary locked in the same basement where we'd discovered the truth, struck but alive. She'd refused to reveal where I'd gone despite their worst efforts. When agents brought her out, she asked only about Samuel, her son, our son, the child we'd both raised. The reunion happened at the federal building. Patricia's safe house network sounds like Underground Railroad meets witness protection, meets that friend who always knows someone who knows someone, except everyone's password is probably death to Elder Thompson. Mary limped in, face bruised but eyes bright. Samuel reached for her immediately, recognizing something primal despite months of separation. She sobbed as she held him, finally allowed to be his mother. I watched them, joy and grief warring in my chest. This was right. This was necessary. But my arms felt empty without his weight. 7 months of forced motherhood had rewired my heart in ways I couldn't undo. The federal agents separated us for individual interviews. I spent hours detailing every aspect of the program while Samuel stayed with a social worker in the next room. Through the glass, I watched him play with blocks, occasionally looking around for me. My body ached to hold him. Mary's interview lasted even longer. She had insider knowledge I lacked, which elders ran what aspects, where the money went, how many women had been through the program. Her husband was arrested trying to destroy evidence at their house. By evening, agents had raided the community. They found the grave sites exactly where our photos indicated. 17 women buried in unmarked plots. 17 mothers who'd tried to expose the truth or simply couldn't endure the torture anymore. The medical examiner confirmed what we suspected. Several showed signs of violence. Others had overdosed on the same experimental fertility substances they'd been forced to take. The community had been culling women for over a decade. More families came forward as news spread. Women who'd survived the program but never spoke up. Fathers who'd been told their wives left voluntarily. Children who'd grown up believing their mothers abandoned them. The truth shattered dozens of lives. Catherine Donovan arranged temporary housing for us at the shelter. Mary and I shared a room with Samuel while the investigation continued. We fell into an awkward routine, both mothering him, neither sure of our roles anymore. He needed us both, reaching for whoever wasn't holding him. The custody documents Elder Thompson had filed became evidence of fraud. Mary's husband admitted he'd signed under threat of excommunication. The community's attempt to paint me as a kidnapper backfired spectacularly. Their own paperwork proved the conspiracy. Federal prosecutors built their case methodically. The forced miscarriages alone warranted multiple murder charges. The baby trafficking network they'd uncovered reached into 3 states. Elder Thompson faced life in prison. His wife, who'd scored my maternal performance so coldly, was charged as an accomplice. Other communities watched nervously. Patricia's network reported increased security at similar compounds. Some programs shut down overnight, others doubled down, warning members about the persecution coming. Our case had ripple effects we couldn't have imagined. Rachel, Mary's sister-in-law, became a key witness. She documented everything after suspecting the vitamins were harmful. Her testimony about the financial aspects helped prosecutors freeze the community's assets. Millions of dollars from baby sales, all traced through Elder Thompson's accounts. The other women who'd failed the program began reaching out. They formed a support group that met weekly at the shelter. Sharing their stories helped them process the trauma. Mary and I attended, though our experience was unique. We'd both been victim and unwitting perpetrator. Samuel thrived despite the chaos. He started walking during the 3rd week at the shelter, taking his first steps between Mary and me. We both cried, remembering the babies who'd never reached this milestone. Lucy, the 17 in unmarked graves, all the others we didn't know about. The prosecutor warned us the trial would take months to begin. We needed stable housing, income, plans for Samuel's future. The shelter couldn't support us indefinitely. Real life waited beyond the immediate crisis. Mary's family outside the community offered her a place to stay. Her parents had been searching for her since she'd joined the group 5 years ago. They welcomed their grandson with tears and promises of support, but it meant leaving the area, starting over completely. I had nowhere to go. My family had disowned me when I joined the community. My old life felt like a stranger's story. Catherine helped me apply for assistance programs, but I struggled to imagine any future that made sense. The conversation happened late one night while Samuel slept between us. Mary suggested I come with them. Her parents had room. Samuel needed stability, and he was bonded to us both. We could figure out custody later. For now, he needed the only 2 mothers he'd known. Patricia visited before we left, bringing news from her network. 3 more communities had been raided based on our evidence. The pattern we'd exposed was helping other women escape. Our suffering had created a roadmap for their freedom. Amanda Chen's follow-up articles detailed the investigation's progress. She kept our names private, but the story had gained national attention. Religious freedom advocates clashed with women's rights groups. Politicians debated legislation. We'd started something bigger than we'd intended. Mary's parents lived in a small coastal town 6 hours away. The house smelled like cinnamon and sea salt. Her mother took one look at us, exhausted, traumatized, clutching Samuel between us, and simply opened her arms. No questions, just acceptance. We settled into adjacent rooms. Samuel's crib sat between them, accessible to both of us. He woke multiple times nightly, confused by another new environment. Mary and I took turns comforting him, our shared motherhood now voluntary rather than forced. Days passed in gentle routine. Mary's father was a fisherman who left before dawn. Her mother ran a small bakery. They gave us space to heal while ensuring we never felt alone. Samuel learned to call them Nana and Papa, Papa, his first words beyond mama, which he used for both of us. The trial date was set for 6 months out. We'd have to testify, relive every moment for a jury. The prosecutor sent prep materials, but I couldn't read them yet. The trauma felt too fresh, too raw. Mary had nightmares about the basement, about them taking Samuel again. I found work at the local library. Quiet, predictable, safe. Mary took shifts at her mother's bakery. We alternated childcare, Samuel always with one of us. The custody arrangement remained informal. Neither of us pushed for legal definitions. He needed us both. 3 months in, Mary met someone, a customer at the bakery who made her laugh. She felt guilty for wanting happiness, for moving forward while other women remained trapped. I encouraged her to try. Healing didn't mean forgetting. I started therapy with someone who specialized in religious trauma. Twice a week, I sat in her office trying to untangle the grief, guilt, and rage. She helped me understand that loving Samuel didn't betray Lucy. Hearts could hold multiple truths. Samuel's second birthday approached. Mary wanted to celebrate properly, the first birthday he'd have outside the community. We planned a small party with her family. I made a cake while she decorated. Normal activities that felt revolutionary after our shared nightmare. That night, she brought up custody again. Her boyfriend was getting serious. They'd talked about moving in together. She wanted Samuel to have stability, legal protection. The informal arrangement couldn't last forever. We needed to decide. I'd known this was coming. Samuel was her biological child. The program that forced me to raise him was criminal. Any court would side with her. But knowing didn't make it easier. 7 months of forced motherhood had created real bonds. We hired a family lawyer who understood our unique situation. She drew up papers that gave Mary primary custody, but granted me extensive visitation rights. Aunt privileges, she called them. I'd remain in Samuel's life, just not as his mother. The transition happened gradually. I moved to my own apartment nearby. Samuel spent weekdays with Mary and weekends with me. He adapted better than we'd expected, secure in knowing both his mamas remained close. The trial began on a cold February morning. Mary and I sat together in the witness room, hands clasped. Other survivors filled the benches. We'd all come to see justice served, to speak for the women who couldn't. My testimony took 2 days. Every detail of the program, the forced nursing, the scoring system. The prosecutor showed photos of Lucy's nursery, still decorated in yellow. I broke down describing her stillness, the silence where her cries should have been. Mary testified about watching 3 women fail with Samuel before me, about the months of separation, the torture of proximity without touch. She described finding the files, our escape, the hunt. Her voice stayed steady until she described Samuel rejecting her that night. Elder Thompson sat unmoved through most testimony, but when they showed photos of the graves, something shifted in his expression. Not remorse exactly, but recognition that his empire had truly fallen. His wife wept as victim after victim took the stand. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Elder Thompson received 40 years to life. His wife got 25 years. Other elders received lesser sentences based on their involvement. The community's assets were liquidated, distributed to survivors. After the verdict, we stood outside the courthouse. 17 families held photos of their lost daughters, mothers, sisters. Justice felt hollow compared to their absence, but it was something. The program was dead. No more women would suffer as we had. Mary's boyfriend proposed that spring. She asked me to be her maid of honor. Strange request given our history, but we'd become family through trauma. I helped her choose a dress that hid the scars from her escape, both physical and emotional. Samuel started preschool that fall. He drew pictures of his 2 houses, his 2 mamas, his growing family. The teacher found it confusing. We didn't explain. Some stories were too complex for casual conversation. I met someone too, a widow who understood complicated grief. She didn't mind that I kept Lucy's ultrasound photo on my nightstand. She held me through nightmares about burning greenhouses and basement files. Love after loss looked different, but it was still love. The 1-year anniversary of our escape approached. Mary suggested we do something to mark it. Not a celebration exactly, but an acknowledgement. We drove past the old community. Federal marshals had seized the property. The building stood empty, awaiting demolition. We parked at the Hooper's farm. They'd rebuilt their barn with insurance money and survivor fund donations. Ruth hugged us fiercely, tears streaming. She'd testified too, about her niece who died in the program. Their courage in hiding us that night had saved lives. Samuel played with their chickens while we talked. He was 3 now, full of questions we'd someday have to answer. Why he had 2 mamas, why we sometimes cried at baby commercials, why certain smells made us freeze. That evening we lit candles for the 17 women in the graves, for Lucy, for all the babies who'd been lost to the program. Mary held my hand as we stood in silence. Some wounds never fully healed. We just learned to carry them. Patricia called occasionally with updates. The network had helped extract dozens more women from similar communities. Our case had become a template for prosecutions nationwide. Change happened slowly, but it happened. I returned to school eventually. Social work felt like a natural fit after everything. Mary opened her own bakery, specializing in comfort foods. We built separate lives that remained intertwined through Samuel and shared survival. 5 years later, at Samuel's 8th birthday, I watched him blow out candles surrounded by friends. A normal child living a normal life. He knew his story in age-appropriate pieces. Someday we'd tell him everything. For now, he just knew he was loved twice over. Mary caught my eye across the party. We'd survived the unsurvivable, found justice for the dead, built lives worth living from the ashes of our trauma. The scars remained, but they no longer defined us. That night, I dreamed of Lucy for the first time in months. Not the stillness of her death, but a vision of who she might have been. 8 years old like Samuel, yellow dress like her nursery. She smiled and waved before fading. A goodbye, a release. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows. Downstairs, my partner made breakfast. Outside, birds sang morning songs. Life had continued despite everything. Different than planned, marked by loss, but still good. The community buildings were demolished that summer. Mary and I attended the ceremony with other survivors. They planned a memorial garden where the church had stood. 17 trees for 17 women, a place of remembrance and warning. Samuel asked to plant one of the trees. He didn't fully understand yet, but he knew it mattered. His small hands patted dirt around the sapling while Mary and I watched. Life growing where death had reigned. The most honest metaphor for our journey. We stayed until sunset, sharing stories with other families. Children played between the trees. Survivors found comfort in community. The program was dead, but we'd built something better from its ruins. Connection born of shared pain and mutual healing. As we drove home, Samuel fell asleep between us in the back seat. Mary reached over to brush hair from his face. I caught her hand, squeezed it briefly. No words needed. We'd said everything through years of actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine at the shelter. Another woman had escaped a similar community, arriving scared and pregnant. They needed someone who understood. I told her I'd come tomorrow. The work continued. That's how healing happened. Not in grand gestures or perfect endings, but in small acts of service. In birthday parties and planted trees. In testimony that saved others. In learning to mother yourself after losing everything. Samuel stirred as we pulled into Mary's driveway. Her husband came out to help carry him inside. I gathered his overnight bag for my weekend. Normal custody exchange. Mundane family logistics. Beautiful in its ordinariness. I drove to my own home thinking about circles. How trauma created patterns. How breaking them required constant choice. How love could grow in the strangest gardens if you tended it carefully. My partner waited on the porch, wine in hand. She knew the anniversary was hard. We'd sit together, not talking much. She'd rub my back when the memories surfaced. Later, we'd plan our own small acts of resistance against cruelty. Inside, Lucy's photo sat beside images of the life I'd built after her. Not a replacement, an addition. Room in my heart for multiple truths. For the daughter I'd lost and the son I'd found. For grief and gratitude together. The investigation files sat in my closet, boxed and labeled. Evidence of horror transformed into historical record. Someday, Samuel would read them. Understand the full weight of his origin. Know how fiercely he'd been loved by women the system tried to break. But not tonight. Tonight was for rest, for healing, for the quiet victory of survival. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new women needing help, new battles against systems that consumed the vulnerable. I poured my own wine, raised it to the photo, to Lucy, to the 17th, to Mary and Samuel and all of us who'd survived, to the painful, necessary work of rebuilding after unimaginable loss. The stars came out slowly, filling the sky with light. Time flies when you're wrapped up in wild stories, huh? Thanks for letting me tag along with my usual nonsense. Until next time, whenever that is.